One of the issues that arises from the human fixation on looks as a primary absolute and as an entry point into any relationship or any sort of carnal relation is that it can serve as a mask for other things. And then oftentimes these other things are extremely potent and extremely damaging and can cause you to suffer immensely. But the mask, the veil, the mirage of looks often blinds you to this fact. I can think of two instances in my life in particular. My very first relationship, the first female that I lost my virginity to, I was age 19, that I was together with for about 2.5 years-ish, a little bit longer technically. And she was pretty good looking. You might have heard me talk about her before. Enormous gazonkas, just ginormous, right? Very superficial of me, but enormous jugosauri. And she was just an amazing screw in bed. It was insane. Never experienced it since, honestly. First time and then boom. And she cooked really well. Right? Now, pretty good looking overall, huge ass knockers. And unfortunately, my late teen, early 20s mindset was, well, that's what's important. Now, she had an enormous temper. She had horrible self-control about regulating that temper. And when she didn't like something, she would flip out. She would become violent sometimes, throw things, and she had a very, very low tolerance threshold for things that kind of ran counter to what she wanted and her expectations. And it was intolerable. At one point in time, she tried to run me over with a car. And for whatever reason, my dumbass early 20-something thought, yeah, it's true, but her blowjobs are amazing, and she cooks really well, and her gazonkas are huge. Now, this was before the internet really took off. This was before a lot of this stuff took off. So I could plead maybe innocence by insanity or whatever. And then later on, a few years later, I met a girl that I probably would say was the most attractive girl I had been with. Like something from an Old Norse or Germanic legend. Rapunzel-like blonde hair, long blonde hair, thick, emerald green eyes, pale white skin, just something from a legend if you're into that sort of thing. And I was. And from the very get-go, there were telltale signs looking back on it. She would refer to birthdays as protocol days, and she was really kind of weird. Ended up being together for over 2 years, borderliner, total nutter. And that relationship fundamentally changed my life. It threw off my studies, it threw off my work, everything changed afterwards. It actually altered the course of my life because I got so knee-deep in it. And again, I was blinded by looks. So what I'm trying to talk about here is the obvious axiom of don't stick your dick in crazy. That's true. But when you are looking for these things, yes, of course, looks are all important. And you need to spend some time discovering what a person is like and figuring that out. But honestly, I know it sounds hypocritical, but if only because I had to go through these lessons myself, you really, really, really should think about things at times apart from looks. Because there are a lot of broken people out there, including broken women, who seem like amazing catches. They might have had some funky stuff go down in their family. They might be severely depressed. They might have some self-esteem issues. They might have daddy issues. You name it. And so after time, that filter sets in, and they're actually more accessible in terms of the looks than they otherwise would be to an average guy. And then you think, wow. And then you discover the very likely reason why that's the case. I've dated girls with severe daddy issues, which ended up being huge age gap relationships. I've seen it all. And another aspect of this is if you're not neurotypical, and I'm certainly not, you're probably not going to attract or be attracted to quote-unquote neurotypical women. Boring, run-of-the-mill, blah, 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 that sort of thing, which is understandable. But then you run the risk of encountering what I was talking about. And I'm not claiming that my story is unique. I have observed countless relationships of friends and acquaintances, and the pattern repeats itself. Some guy who is pretty decent looking or average looking gets a pretty attractive girl, and she turns out to be batshit crazy or have some serious issues. And the relationship just drags on, and the guy's life is destroyed in the process. I could tell you absolutely insane stories, and some of them would strain your credulity, but it really is something you need to consider in this big equation. And again, this is something that people just don't talk about, especially in the lookosphere, in the quote-unquote looks black pill community. The young guys, they're so hyper-focused on the lookism thing, which obviously we're all hyper-focused on looks. But they're so hyper-focused on that they're missing the forest for the trees. Because, yes, you can sometimes get access to a pretty good-looking girl, and then you pay the price. This is a story that has repeated itself probably billions of times during the course of humanity, and tens of millions of times over the last couple of years across the globe. I don't think it's ever worth it. So if I take, for example, the borderline girl that I dated for 2 years, that really just led to a complete remapping of my life afterwards because I got so involved in the whole thing. Was it worth it? Absolutely not. So what that she had blonde Rapunzel-like hair and emerald green eyes? Great. In retrospect, it certainly wasn't worth it. And it's funny with her, because I'll never forget how she permanently ended the relationship. There were 3 breakups. I broke up once, she broke up twice, final breakup. And this is a direct quote or a translation of a direct quote. She said, quote, "You are more cost than benefit to me. I've done the cost-benefit analysis and you've been found wanting." Now, the funny thing about her was she's speaking the truth. At the end of the day, that's how relationships are. They're just cost-benefit. They're just purely transactional. Every human relationship is purely transactional. Of course, when you're the receiving end and at the end of a 2-year relationship, it doesn't feel quite that way, but I learned a lot from that. But paying that price for the sake of looks is never worth it. The insanity that goes with it, the intolerability of the situation you put yourself in. You could argue this is something only young guys make as a mistake. Nope. I mean, I've learned my lesson over the years. The 20-year-old Stardust who was obsessed with the gigantic G-cupped gazonkas, right? I wouldn't repeat that mistake. Not for all the money in the world. But I see plenty of guys my age and even older falling for it again and again and again. And never mind the young guys who are so desperate for female approval that they're willing to tolerate anything and everything. They'll forsake their friends, their family, you name it, just for a piece of booty and a little bit of crazy. It feels as if we've all reached the point where we can acknowledge that looks are supremely important. But what comes after that? And I don't think that's talked about a lot, especially the young guys who have all these aspirations, relationships, maybe marriage, family. They're not thinking along those lines. They're just thinking from that one perspective. And I think it would behoove them, indeed, to think about this other perspective. And older guys have been through that on occasion. It just isn't worth it. If I could go back in time, I honestly would have preferred a plain Jane I had gotten along with and didn't fight with, didn't argue, that didn't completely ruin my life in various respects, to some Rapunzel-like Germanic legend-looking girl, right? It simply wasn't worth it. But that is the power of looks, unfortunately. Looks can overwhelm your rationality very easily. And that's part and parcel why so many women who are attractive can get away with so much, obviously, because the looks overwhelm the reason of the men in question. And I really hope that this message is taken to heart by the young men out there who do have aspirations. If you really, really want that GF, consider other factors apart from, oh, she's hot. Sure, I get it. It's the primary thing. You really need to start thinking about other things if you want to escape that relationship unscathed or with your sanity intact. Anyway, as always, thank you for tuning in. Please leave a like, share, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. And if I'm still alive, I'll check you out later. May the gods watch over you. Take care. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.